How are we? We're having a good time today? All right. This is really, really surreal for me. I was just being backstage with the vice presidents, and I remember so much being over there. And I remember the first rally that I came to like this, and I remember seeing the VPs, and they had their own little, they were backstage, and I remember seeing Jesse and Derek, and they're talking. I remember just wanting it so bad. Like, man, I want to be in that club. And what it must be like to be a vice president, what it must be like to have that kind of money, what it must be like to travel the way that they get to travel, what it must be like to make a difference, in their life, and in their families' lives, and in so many other people's lives. And so it was such an inspiration meeting those guys, and such an inspiration, when I get to see a guy like Derek, call Antonio, run a morning meeting, I'd be so into it. I'd be so, yeah, I want to do this. I want to go big. I'm going to go all the way. And I loved that part. But what I didn't love was after the meeting was over and he would go do what he did, that I would have to go back to the field. That I'd have to go back there knocking. What I didn't like was the hard stuff. I didn't like those days. I didn't like waking up in the morning and to an alarm clock and looking outside and seeing the snow and thinking, oh, really? Really, I got to go knock on doors today? And I didn't like the days that were really, really tough, and I guess we've all had these days. I remember the first really, really hard day that I had. I was in Nashville, and I'd only been in the business a few weeks, and I was working on this campaign where you could, it was possible, the bell was usually won, because it was, a campaign where you could do one sale, and that made you enough money to ring the bell. And so it wasn't very challenging attitude-wise. And up to this point, every single day, I'd rang the bell before lunch, because I'd gotten one yes before lunch, so it wasn't really tough to keep my attitude. And then I had this day where it didn't happen. And I'm at lunch, and I'm like, oh, no. What's going on? This is wrong. I haven't rang the bell yet. And my attitude started to slowly, with every no, go down and down and down and down and down and down. And you know how when your attitude goes down, your pitch gets worse. When your attitude goes down, your work ethic gets worse. You're in an atmosphere and you're practicing, and you've got all these moves with your pitch, and you're excited. And you're like, hey man, how's it going? You bring out the kung fu moves, and you're really you're going for it, right? And then by the time that 76 no's later, your pitch becomes like, hey man, do you want this? I don't imagine you do. Fucking nobody else here wants this shit. And your law of averages with that, it isn't very good. And it's zero, actually. And I remember getting to no number 78, and I was just so defeated. And I remember coming up, I still remember the neighborhood, the house. It's this big, massive house. And I was thinking, man, must be cool to live in a place like this. And then I knocked on the door, and it was the first really hard no I'd ever had. The first, you remember the first time someone didn't even let you talk? They just, opened the door, saw you, and that's what happened, Knock on the door, hey man, how's it going? And he just looked at me, and the wind from the door. I'm like, and I stood there, and first I just got mad. I'm like, that's not very smart. I know where you live. I'm going to come back and burn down your house. This is not cool. And then I'm just standing there, and I just couldn't take it. And I remember it wasn't I didn't believe in the business. I'd seen people get promoted. I'd seen vice presidents. I'd seen people do it. But I lost belief that I could do it. And I remember leaving all my merchandise and everything right on his front door, and walking away, going back to my Volvo, my car, and just saying, this isn't going to be something I'm going to be able to do. Christoph from Kentucky, he's not got what it takes to do this. And that city happened to be my hometown, and so I'm driving away, and I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to say anything to anybody. I'm just driving home. And one thing that I always did was, I get really down on myself, so I go watch, a funny movie. Love movies. And so I'm driving home, and I pass this movie theater, and I'm like, you know what? This has been a really bad day. I'm just going to go see a movie. I'm going to go see a comedy. It's going to be awesome. So I get out there, and I have the billboards, out in front of the movie theater to tell you which movie's what. And So I'm looking and I see one of my favorite actors is Will Smith. If any Will Smith fans here, you know how good he is. Yeah, there we go. And I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. I mean, I remember the last Will Smith movie I saw was Bad Boys. It was hilarious. I'm going to go watch Will Smith. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to feel a lot better. So I go in and I buy a ticket, and turns out the movie wasn't a comedy. It was actually a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. Any of you guys have ever seen that? It's kind of opposite of a comedy, and you know, it's about this guy, and he's in direct sales, and he's trying to sell, and he's going broke, and going broke, and going broke, and at some point, things are so down, everybody's telling him no, and the world's not going to work, and at some point, he doesn't have a place to stay, and he's in the basement of some train station, and he's in the bathroom, and he's got his kid there, and he's sleeping. It's just like the ultimate point of defeat, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm getting excited. I'm like, come on, Will, come on, baby, you can do it, you can win, let's go. And, walking out of the movie, I'm like, yeah, he got it, he did it. Good for you. And then I remember standing there, just out inside of the parking lot, I'm like, how excited am I getting right now for an actor that's already a millionaire? And I can't get that excited about my own life. And that turned me around. That movie saved my life. And I remember going back to Atmosphere, and I didn't have the production that day, but I did have a new look on things. And a few weeks later, I got the opportunity to move with my manager Jack down to Atlanta, which was incredible opportunity. I was going to get to be in the same building as this legend in our company, Derek Colantonio, who you guys are going to hear speak later on. And but it was a huge move for me. I'm from a town of 5,000 people, and this place had 5 million people. It was the biggest city I'd ever been to in my life, and it was 5 hours away from everything that I had ever been around, everything I'd ever lived around. And so it was a huge culture shock. And we also changed campaigns once I got down there. And I remember just struggling, and I'm not picking up the field. Things aren't going well. I got nobody on my crew. And one thing I was really insecure about back then was that I never finished my college education and didn't have a degree. Because the way I was raised, my family just thought that if you had an education, you'd be successful. If you didn't have an education, you wouldn't be successful. And I got into a pretty good university, but I left. And so I always had this trick with my observations where we'd start talking about their life and where they went to university, and so I'd always say, oh yeah, and I went to university at Vanderbilt, and they'd say, oh wow, that's a good school. I'm like, yeah, it's a good school. But never mentioning the fact that I never completed, and because it was embarrassing to me. And I remember one day I get this observation, and my manager said, "Hey, listen, she went to the same university as you, so that's something you guys have in common. That's something you can talk about." And I don't know what this girl's doing now, but she had a pretty bad attitude. And we're talking, and we're in the car ride out, and I'm trying to explain the business, and she's not really having it, and I'm trying to pitch the business, which you shouldn't do. And at some point we get onto university, and she says, oh yeah, went to Vanderbilt, so I think I'm really qualified to do a lot of things. And I said, oh yeah, that's where I went to university too. She said, oh really? I said, yeah. She said, what year did you graduate? And so then I say, oh, well, I didn't actually graduate. So she said, oh, okay, so you didn't graduate. And so this was kind of like a stab to me. And anyway, she makes it through, and we're knocking, and we're going through the first lap. And I remember this guy too. I knocked on his door, and he opens it up, and I give my pitch, and I'm really nice. Hey, we're coming by from this company, and here's what we want to do, yada, 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 yada. And he just looks at me, and he says, so you dropped out of university to do this? And he slams the door. And then my observation looks at me, and she's like, same for me. So she walks away. And I'm so embarrassed, and I'm so, not feeling like a business person, not feeling like a successful person. And, I didn't physically give up that day, but I definitely mentally gave up. And I remember going home that night and not knowing if I could do this or not. And remember thinking, you know what, I'm just going to leave. And 3 weeks earlier, or 5 weeks earlier, when I seen that Will Smith movie, the next day after that, I'd seen an opportunity meeting. I remember calling my dad and saying, "Oh man, I found the thing. I found the thing that's going to retire you. I found the business. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get you free." And he's real supportive of just about anything. He's one of these easy dads. I could be like, "Hey dad, I decided I'm going to be a drug dealer," and he'd be like, "Oh, that's good. That's good, son. Work hard." And, so I told him this crazy thing. "Oh, I'm going to retire you from this." He's like, "Yeah, good job there. No problem." And so this day now, it's only 5 weeks later, but it feels like 5 months later. And I remember going home that night, and I'm out. I lived with my manager, and it was long after he went to bed. I'm out on the porch, I'm smoking cigarettes, and I'm just thinking, it's just too hard. I don't have it. I'm just not going to be able to do this. And I made a decision right then. Okay, I'm going to quit. I'm done. And so then I started planning, how am I going to get out of this? And what are the conversations I'm going to have? And, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to tell my manager in the morning, and that's really going to be uncomfortable because he's done so much for me, and I really appreciate him, but I'm going to have to tell him, and, he'll be disappointed for sure, but he'll understand. He's seen people quit before. I'm sure it's not the first time. And then I remember thinking, all right, cool, and then I'll need to call my mom and tell her, and I know what she's going to be like. She's just going to say, "I told you so, when are you going to get a real job?" And it's like, well, that's going to suck too, but I'm okay. I can deal with that conversation. And then, I'm starting to pack up my bags in my room, pack up my books and stuff. And then I remember my dad, and I remember that I've got to give him a call too. And then I remember thinking, what am I going to tell him? So 5 weeks ago, I was so excited about this thing. This was going to change the whole family. So now I'm going to call him and tell him what? "Sorry, Dad, I'm not really strong enough. I don't have the courage. I don't have the guts. I'm going to quit. And I'm going to quit on you, and I'm going to quit on that promise I made to you." And this was March, and I just started thinking about Christmas for some reason, and started thinking, you know what? Christmas is going to come, and it's about 8 months away. And where am I going to be when Christmas comes? Because Christmas is going to come whether or not I want it to come. Christmas is definitely going to happen. These next 8 months are going to happen regardless of the decision that I make tonight. And I started thinking, this is really only going to have a few possibilities. One is, I could quit tonight, and then at Christmas I'll be struggling just like I'm struggling every Christmas, and the family's going to be there, and they're going to say, "What are you doing now?" And, I'm going to say, "Well, I'm not really anything different from last year. I'm still, not successful. I'm still not doing anything." Or I could say, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm still in that door-to-door business, that you hate and everybody hates." Or I remember thinking, when my aunt asked me that question, I could say, "You know what? I own a company now. That's what I'm doing." And I just thought, if it's only going to be 8 months, then it's 8 months from now to then, what if I just give everything I got? What if I just go all in? What if I just try as hard as I've ever tried at anything? What if I just give all of it? If I just give 100%, if it doesn't work, fine, but at least I'll know I gave it everything I had. And to do that took me having to change how I looked at negatives. And it's kind of normal, the way that we grew up. We have a certain idea about how to look at obstacles. Life, there's one way that life teaches you to look at negatives, but it's a very different way than how successful people look at negatives. Life had taught me that when I see a negative, I need to run away. I need to avoid the hard conversations. I need to avoid the bad situations. If you see a negative, just run, just get out of there. You don't want to deal with it, that it's a terrible event. And it also taught me, just growing up, that, hey, if you do have a negative, you can't pay your rent or whatever, that it's going to be out of your control. So, you know what? Well, you're struggling with money. Well, you grew up poor, so you're always going to be poor. That's just how it is. You can't really change it. And what I learned here was a completely different way to look at that. What I learned here was that your negatives are your opportunity to learn. That when I have a negative, that's my opportunity to show that I can win and I can do something significant. I can not give up when everybody else would. And that it's not about the negative itself, it's about what I do with that. Because the solution is actually all in my control. The solution to overcoming that problem, I can overcome it just with my attitude, just with my work ethic, just with asking more questions. And that negatives are the best teacher that you have, because they have a way of exposing what you're weak at and showing you what you need to work on. And they'll keep reappearing over and over and over again until you either fix that weakness or you give up. And that's not just specific to our industry. That's specific to anyone who's ever been successful at anything. And you guys are gonna hear Antoine Norris speak today, and he's the most successful person I've ever met. He's one of the top businessmen alive right now, and owns dozens and dozens of companies all over the world. Ask him what it takes to be successful in other businesses. He'll tell you it takes exactly the same thing that it takes to ring the bell. It takes exactly the same mentality to be successful elsewhere as it does to graduate our program. So really the choice is, either you're going to choose to be successful or you're not. And I think everybody in this room has two choices. Everybody in this room has two futures. Either you're going to choose to go down a path that leads you to vice president, or you're going to choose not to. And it's unfortunate, we have these events and everyone gets really, really excited, and some of you are going to go home and you're going to be really excited, and you're going to be excited on Monday and excited on Friday, but over a few weeks, at some point, that excitement's going to wear off, and those negatives are going to pile up, and those negatives are going to come on top of each other. And for some of you, for a lot of you, at some point, those negatives are going to become more important than your goals. They're going to become more important than the future that you say right now that you want. They're going to become more important than the future your family could have if you did this. And you'll leave, and you'll quit, and that's fine. I'm not saying you'll have a bad life. I'm not saying you won't have a good life. I'm just saying you probably have a common life. And common was the life that I'd always had. And common lives come with common problems. You guys knock on doors every day. You know more about the public right now than anybody in any profession. How happy are the people you meet in the field? How many of them have problems? Does everybody live in the dream outside of these walls? They're not. And I knew enough about common to know that I didn't want it anymore. That I had to make a decision. That this is it. This is going to be the last time I struggle to pay the rent. This is going to be the last time we have problems at Christmas. This will be the last time I get a phone call from my sister in tears because my nephew's in the hospital again because nobody can afford a decent doctor. This is it. And I don't care about the negatives, and I don't care about the pain. I'd rather go through the pain of changing and becoming successful than having the pain of living a common life for another 45 years. And I hope you make that choice. When you do get to VP Club, nobody asks you how long it took. Nobody asks you, how many no's you have to take to get here. Nobody cares. Because the reward is so much more important than anything negative that you're going to go through. Guys, this is the last thing, if you do it right, this is the last thing you'll ever have to get good at. I hope you do. Thank you. All right, you guys want some awards? Yeah, okay. Our next awards, we gave out the top awards for the leaders, and just like in your office, there are leaders that perform above and beyond everywhere else. Well, the same thing is true in organizations, and the same thing is true with owners. And the next award that we're going to hand out is called the Outstanding Achievement Award. And what that means is that every owner you're going to hear called out for 2 weeks in a row had a wire of at least 5,000 euros and runs an office of 25 guys. So they're above and beyond the average. They're the people that we're looking at and we're saying, in the future, these people are going to be the next people getting promoted. We're saying that as a group, this is the cream of the crop. So we'll start off our first Outstanding Achievement Award. Goes to Alberto Perez.
Counting the hours and
Next up, we have Alex Stanich. Next up, we have Antonio Molina. Arthur Magic. Damian Croft. Daniela Chirac. David Martinez. Emilio Pina. Gustavo Rodriguez. Jack Burtock. James Kilgallen. Joao Donato. Jose Luis Pontones. Jose Miguel Busca. Laura Fernandez.
Rolling dice are staying out till 3. You won't ever find him being unfair.
Our next award, she could not be here today because she is 36 weeks pregnant, but we're going to give her recognition, Patricia Fernandez.
J-Lo, ya tú sabes, no hay más nada.
It's a new generation.
Paul Deneb.
I'm loose, and everybody knows I get off the train. Baby, it's the truth. I'm like
Peter Rudge.
I don't play no games, so don't get it confused, no. Cause you will lose, yeah.
Raquel Calvo.
Party people step on the floor. If you're an animal, then tear up the floor. Break the sweat on the floor. Yeah.
Mr. Ryan Tracy.
On the floor. Let the rhythm change your world on the floor. You know we're running tonight.
Finally, Sean Grace. All right, guys. Listen, our next speaker, I talked a little bit about him before. We're really lucky to have him here. He is, super successful. But what's awesome is he started just like me, started just like you, started in the field. But what he's done, not just for our business, but for the whole world of sales, he's really been one of the pioneers of our entire industry. And every single time that we have a person, or we have a crew, or we have a team that has an ambition level to go open up a new country, before that can happen, there has to be an investment in structure, and there has to be an investment in the people that have those ambitions. And that's what Tony has done for every country here today. I've been really fortunate to get to know him over the last year or so. And I tell you, I've learned just as much about our business as I've also learned just about being successful in general. So please, lots of applause for our international chairman, Antoine Nora.